We'll walk through the sections of the PSID questionnaire in this series of videos. In doing so, you'll have a sense of what each questionnaire section contains and see some of the screens from Blaze, the computer program in which the questionnaire is programmed. The concept of family listing was covered in detail in its respective video, so we will not cover it here. The PSID questionnaire has a number of sections after the cover screen, covering income, wealth, and expenses. We will go through each in a little bit of detail. Once you've done the family listing, you will identify the respondent. It's the person you've been doing the family listing with. This screen is where you record who it is. The application will give you a list of the names and the relationships to the reference person for all people in the FU who are old enough to be the respondent. In this example, we have the male reference person, Dan, and Lisa, the spouse. There is also the option to indicate that the respondent is a proxy. Please note that we'd prefer the same respondent as the previous wave, because consistency in responses is very valuable. But the previous interviewer's observations may indicate that the respondent was not knowledgeable about the FU's finances. Or it may be that the previous respondent is consistently unavailable when you call this wave. So you may need to switch respondents to make sure that we get the interview or to get good data. On rare occasions, you'll be talking to a proxy respondent. In the PSID, a proxy respondent must be someone who is not in the FU and must only be used when the usual respondent is incapable of doing the interview. Most cases of proxy in the PSID involve a relative doing the interview for, say, an elderly reference person who is incapable of doing the interview because of age or health problems. You must not use a proxy as a way of getting around a refusal or for an FU that is simply not available. If something seems off, for example, you're talking to Dan and the questions aren't worded correctly, that may be an indication that you chose the wrong respondent. If you do choose the wrong respondent, please stop, suspend the interview, and call your TL immediately. Take your time and make sure you choose the right respondent at the R selection screen to avoid this serious error. The first part of the questionnaire is Section A. This covers the FU's housing situation and costs, and has a bit about computer usage at the end. Here are the general topics covered. The housing situation, whether the FU owns, rents, or neither, their housing costs, their utility costs, and their computer and internet use. There are many points in the Section A questions where the PSID has technical definitions of terms that respondents may define differently, such as different types of dwelling. You will find on-screen instructions and question-by-question objectives to help you ensure that the respondent is properly understanding the questions, and you are coding their responses as intended. Some of the earliest questions in Section A cover the FU's type of dwelling. We're looking for a type of structure here, not a type of ownership. People will sometimes say condo, but that actually is a type of ownership. Houses, apartments, and townhouses can all be condominiums. You should use the provided definitions to help you probe for a codable answer. We also want to know whether the FU owns their dwelling, rents it, or neither. As you will see, different questions will come up depending on which one of these options you choose. For example, if they own, we ask house value and a string of mortgage questions. If they rent, we'll ask the rental amount. If they neither own nor rent, we ask what they pay if they rented. Here are some things to note about housing. First, the housing questions pertain to the FU only. They should not include what is used or paid for by any HU or HUCS people. All answers, such as number of rooms, amount of rent, whether owning or renting, need to reflect the situation of the whole FU. That's easy if there's just one person. But it can be tricky if there are more people, or especially if there are HU or HUCS people living there. For instance, if our FU shares an apartment with a roommate, who of course would be HU, we would only want the amount of rent the people in the FU pay. We do not want the full rent if the roommate pays part of it. Second, when someone in the FU owns and someone in the FU also rents, you select owns because it takes priority. Let's look at a couple of examples. A mother and daughter live together in a house. The mother owns the house and the daughter pays her rent. If both are FU members, then the answer should be owns. But if this is the daughter's cover sheet and her mother is HUCS, then the answer should be rents, because no one in the FU is the owner. If you focus on who is in the FU and include the information about everyone in the FU, the owns and rents cases are fairly straightforward. Now let's move on to situations where the family doesn't own, but they're not renting either. There are 3 typical cases of FUs that neither own nor rent. First, we often have adult children who have their own cover sheet because they moved out and were split-offs in a previous wave. But now they're back living with the parents or other relatives. If they pay rent to the parents, you would select rents, just like if they were renting an apartment. But if they don't pay the parents any rent, you should indicate that they neither own nor rent. We then ask what the rent would be if they did pay rent. We mean just for the rooms they have use of, not necessarily for the whole house or apartment. The second common situation is that of a person whose housing is free as part of their compensation for their job. For an example, an apartment building manager who lives in the building rent-free. A third example is someone whose total rent is paid by someone else who is not living there, perhaps a family member who lives elsewhere. Or your FU may live in Section 8 housing where the rent is totally subsidized. After the housing type and costs, we move on to questions about costs of various utilities. Many people get electric and gas on the same bill and cannot separate these costs. The second question in the sequence asks about this. You will get one sequence of questions if they are billed together and the respondent can't separate them out, and the other sequence of questions if the respondent knows the separate amounts. Remember, at the individual questions about utility amounts, you can enter 0 for FUs that don't use a utility or that a utility is included in the rent. The last topic in Section A is Internet use. Questions on Internet use are only asked about the reference person and the spouse or partner. Sometimes respondents will report dollar amounts that don't fit the options provided. When this happens, you will always first use standard probing to try to get a codable response. If that doesn't work, but the respondent provides information that can be used to calculate the amount, don't attempt to use the information the respondent provided to calculate an answer yourself. Instead, enter the response as $1. This is a PSID convention, sometimes called the $1 flag. Enter $1 and enter the information the respondent gave in an F2 note. PSID staff will do the calculation and edit the response in the data. You will always enter an F2 note to explain the $1 entry. A $1 flag without an F2 note is useless to the data editors. The residence section asks about the places the respondent has lived in the last 2 years and the likelihood that they may move in the future. Next is section BC. This is one of the major, most fundamental sections of the PSID questionnaire. It covers the information we collect on the reference person and spouse partner's current employment status, job occupation and industry, weeks worked, hours per week worked, and earnings, as well as information on whether they were looking for work or another job and their time use on the job. In PastWave, some of this information was gathered using an event history calendar, EHC, an interviewing methodology that displays a calendar to assist in gathering this information. A significant change this wave is the replacement of the EHC with standard interview questions. Please be particularly careful in this section in recording the answers the respondents give. Some of the PSID definitions of basic employment concepts do not correspond exactly to the way respondents may think about their jobs and time off. Part of your job as the interviewer is to take the information the respondent gives you and enter it in the appropriate category. It is important that you review the Q-by-Qs for these questions concerning how the reference person and/or spouse partner is paid. While most working respondents will be paid a salary or hourly wage, there are some who get paid differently. Perhaps they only get a commission or get paid by the job, the day, or by the mile rather than by the hour. By reviewing the Q-by-Qs, you will know which answer option to choose. Getting things right here is critical to having the best data available for our researchers. It is also necessary because one answer to an early question may lead you through a different set of questions than another answer would. The first question in section BC is a very important question on employment status. The answer you choose here will determine which of several different sequences of questions will be asked. The actual question reads, "We would like to know about what you do. Are you working now, looking for work, retired, keeping house, a student, or what?" The screen will display several response categories, and you should select all that apply. Remember to probe. Anything else? Knowing the PSID definitions of these categories and why we make certain distinctions will help you code the respondent's answer correctly. Let's go over the answer choices one by one to see what each means in PSID terms. Working now means that the person has an employer. They may work for themselves or someone else. They are currently working at their job, and it is work for money. A woman who keeps the books for her husband's business, but who is not directly paid by him and is not a legal owner of the business, is not working now. Someone who only gets room and board in exchange for their work is not counted as working now. The compensation has to be money, whether it's in the form of wages, a commission, or a share of the profits, for the work to count as a job. One trouble spot with this question is that people may say they are not working when they actually do have a job. It's just not a full-time job or not the kind they want. But even if they are underemployed from their point of view, they are working now for the PSID, as long as it's work for money. An example is a woman who does occasional babysitting or hairdressing as the source of a little extra cash. She may not consider this to be a real job. But since she's putting in time and getting paid for it, she is working now in PSID terms, even if it's only an hour a week. The next answer choice is temporarily laid off or furloughed, or on sick or maternity leave. To fit this category, the person must have a job working for money, but they're temporarily not putting in hours for it. This may be because they are on layoff or furlough, shut down, or on official leave such as maternity leave or long-term sick leave. The critical point is that they have a job to return to at the end of the time off. Here are some examples. A construction worker temporarily not working because of bad weather. A factory worker laid off during an equipment changeover. A worker on official sick leave with a broken leg. A retail employee on furlough temporarily due to COVID-19. Please note, though, this is a temporary layoff situation. A person who has been laid off in the sense that their job has been terminated does not belong here. Anyone who answers either of these first two categories, working now or temporarily laid off, will have to give you a current job employer name in the next questions. The next category is unemployed and looking for work. To be in this category, the reference person must not have a job, but must be actively looking for one. The second part of the definition is critical. The PSID distinguishes between people who are not working but are looking for a job versus people who are not working and not looking for a job. This is one of the major points in the interview where a respondent is likely to think a term means something different. They may think that unemployed simply means not working. Our definition separates out the people who aren't working but are actively looking for a job. This is because federal labor statistics count these actively looking people as being in the labor force. So you should only code someone as unemployed if they do not have a job but are looking for one. Examples of the category unemployed and looking for work are a recent graduate who's looking for his or her first job, someone who quit one job and is looking for another one, someone who was laid off permanently, downsized, or fired, and is now looking for another job. The next four categories cover people who are not working, but also not looking for work. The options are retired, permanently or temporarily disabled, keeping house, and student. A note about the category keeping house. This should be used for anyone who is primarily staying at home and does not fit into the other categories such as disabled or student. Here's the reason why it's crucial to code the respondent's employment status correctly. If you choose one of the first two answers, working now or temporarily laid off, you will go through one set of questions in section BC, which will ask about job duties, wage rates, hours and weeks worked, time off from work, and so on. If you choose one of the last four answers, you will go through a different set of questions, including asking the reason why the respondent is not looking for work. There are, of course, people who will answer retired or student or even unemployed and looking, but they're actually doing some sort of paid work, maybe part-time. To make sure these people get asked questions about their work, anytime you choose one of the answers other than working now or temporarily laid off, two follow-up questions will come up. These ask if the person is doing any work for money now, no matter how small, and also whether they've done any work for money since January 1st, 2 years before the interview. If they say yes to either of these, they will get routed through the questions about job duties, wages, hours, and so on. Once you've completed questions about the reference person, you will then ask these questions for the spouse or partner. The next set of concepts we'll look at covers the way someone can spend time away from work. You'll start with the time the reference person or spouse partner spent away from the job. This will only be asked about people who have given you a job that they've worked in the previous year. By definition, you can't have time away from a job when you weren't employed. There are 5 different types of time off from the job that we ask about. Time off when someone else was sick. Time off when the reference person or spouse partner was sick. Vacation or time off. Time on strike. And time spent on temporary layoff. Just a couple comments about these. Time off due to being sick or caring for someone else who's sick does not have to be paid sick time. Time off for vacation also doesn't have to be paid vacation time, and the person doesn't need to have actually gone on vacation. For example, for teachers whose contract does not end at the end of the school year, the summer months count as vacation time. The category temporary layoff needs to be temporary. This person must expect to return to work with the same employer in the near future. Finally, time off for having a baby is usually counted as vacation time. This includes maternity leaves and sick leaves used for time off to have a baby. This time should only be reported under time off for being sick if the woman was actually sick during that time. If the reference person and/or spouse partner did work during the previous 2 years, then the Blaze employment sequence will contain several questions about the jobs reported. These questions start with the person's occupation, his or her duties on the job, and what industry they work in. These are open-ended questions, but the answers will later be coded using the Census Bureau's occupation and industry codes. It's very important to probe well. If the reference person is a factory worker, what does he or she do at the factory? Work on an assembly line as a press operator, a custodian, or maybe a foreman? We want the best description that you can give us of their job tasks. Another example is engineer. What type? Does he drive a train? Or is that an electrical engineer? Nuclear engineer? Chemical engineer? Maybe they're an automotive engineer at Ford or GM, but what does she specialize in? Body design, parts design, engine design? You'll hear more about what type of information we need for both occupation and industry during training. We will also ask whether they are self-employed or employed by someone else. There is also another choice, both someone else and self, but this is rare. We need this information so we can ask the appropriate questions for that type of employment. For instance, whether a self-employed person's business is incorporated or not, or whether they work for the federal, state, or local government, or a private employer. If they are self-employed, we ask whether he is a farmer or rancher. This is an important question because it'll trigger the right set of income questions to be asked later in Section G. Notably, these questions are not asked identically for all respondents. They will only be asked if we had missing data from last wave or if there had been changes since then. Additionally, industry questions are not asked if the current main job remains the same as previously reported. Occupation questions are not asked if the job title remains the same or if the job title is different, but the duties are the same.